Hello, brothers and sisters, and welcome to day 219 of the Chronological Read Through the Bible. Today we're in Daniel chapter 2 and 3, primarily for my commentary. Now, both of these chapters are so important, yet, even though they're right next to each other, they're divided by about 20 years. I just want to lead out with you realizing the time difference here. Now, we're not really sure how much time has lapsed from chapter 1 to chapter 2. Something, though, that I do want to address is that in chapter 1, when Nebuchadnezzar goes into Jerusalem and takes away the captives, at that time he is not king. His father is king. And so he was acting on his father's direction and his father's wishes. But now Nebuchadnezzar is king. And he has this dream that just captures his conscience. But he doesn't remember all of the dream when he wakes. He just remembers fragments of it. And he is perplexed by this dream. He knows that this has a deep meaning. So here is the nation of Babylon that has gathered all of these necromancers, these witches, these wizards, the magicians from all around the world. They've trained people. There's probably never been a society that had such a mixture of the occult as what was in Babylon at that time. And they turn to these people and he says, "Come, explain my dream to me." And well, tell us the dream. And he's like, "Well, no, you tell me the dream." And they can't do this, right? None of them can. And he says, "Then you're going to be put to death. You can't tell me what my dream is." And yet Daniel is the one to speak up. Daniel is the one that says to the chief executioner, "Whoa, wait, give us time. Let me gather my friends and we're going to give you an answer, but give us a little time." And we see he gathers Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I should use their other names, but they're real Hebrew names, but we'll stick with their Babylonian names. He's gathered them together, and they're going to seek the Lord for an answer for Nebuchadnezzar. And you're likely very familiar with this and the meaning, but just for the one who might not be, we see this great prophetic teaching come from this. And even when Daniel gives it, he doesn't know necessarily who the different armies are going to be. But let's break this down. So we have the head of gold, which this would have really gotten to the ego of Nebuchadnezzar, right? Because his kingdom is that head of gold. And then silver, the breast, the upper body is silver. So still a precious metal, not near as precious as gold. And that's going to be the Medo-Persian Empire, which will defeat the Babylonians. And then we have bronze, which represents the Greek Empire, which will really be the ones that wipe out the Medo-Persians. And the Greek Empire will spread. Each of these really represent these world empires, and each one becoming a little bigger than the previous. There was parts of the world at that time that under the Greeks or under Alexander the Great, parts of the world that almost were undiscovered at that point that he ends up going into. But the Romans will come along, and they represent the legs of iron. And the Romans will, of course, maintain a big part of the world as a world power. But then we're left with the feet of clay, iron and clay mixed together. And we're not given an exact nation, because we, or the modern world, are that nation, that clay feet. And the rock is going to be hurled at it, and the entire statue will crumble, will fall when that rock hits those feet. What is the rock? The rock, the stone that makes men stumble, the rock that makes men fall. It's the cornerstone. It's the chief cornerstone. It's our Messiah. And when the Messiah comes to these empires, they will not stand. But you can see, if you look across history, how each of the world armies, the controlling world armies, have built one upon another. Though they would attack each other, they would gain the knowledge, gain the armament, they would gain technology as they conquered one another. But they also would wander further and further away from God. I know we always like to think, well, oh no, our army didn't wander away from, but mankind does. And they follow their own desires. And we need to make sure we're following the Lord's desires and not man's. Now, I always think that it's interesting that Nebuchadnezzar's had this dream in chapter 2 of this statue. And then when we get to chapter 3, he erects the statue. Not made as this one, but I think that his statue that he builds of himself was partly inspired by this. At least I think so. We're never given that exact picture, but as I say, some 20 years passed. And it's the children's story that we're so familiar with. I say children's because it's one of the inspiring stories that we use with our youth and our children, but it should be used with adults as well. And it's that when the statue is erected, the people are told, when you hear these musical instruments play, the harp and the lyre and the tambourine and the trumpet, you're to bow before the statue and worship it. And when that time comes, 3 men refuse to bow: Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Now, where Daniel was at that time, I don't know. I always have found that interesting that he's obviously not in the crowd. Daniel wouldn't have bowed to it either, I wouldn't believe. So we don't know exactly where Daniel was. There had to be other Jewish people there, and they apparently bowed. But just these 3 men, these 3 young men who once had sat with Daniel and refused to eat the food that was unclean from the king's table. Then these are the same young men who gathered together with Daniel to pray and seek God's face as to an understanding of Nebuchadnezzar's dream. And now they stand there and do not bow. You know, a lot of people, they'll bow just a little bit. They say, well, you know, for my placement, maybe I'll bow just a little bit. I won't give his name because my next statement's a little controversial, but there was a Christian leader during the time of the Nazi Empire, and he was seen as a spy among the Nazis, an anti-Nazi. But his students were shocked when they saw him giving the Nazi salute, the Hitler salute. And it's always excused by saying, well, he did that so that he could be in this place to be a part of the assassination attempt on Hitler. And that makes it excusable. Well, our Bible lesson here of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego wouldn't really be very strong if they had bowed before the statue. And the reason is well, they were trying to assassinate Nebuchadnezzar, and they were trying to get a little close to him. And then you say, well, how did that assassination attempt work? Well, it didn't. It failed. I just want you to realize that we don't need to compromise, not even a little bit. And sometimes a part of the problem in the world today is there's too many people that are quick to compromise. Let's not compromise. Let's not make excuses. Those days need to be done with. And we need to be like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and we need to stand. When they're brought before Nebuchadnezzar and charged, and he says you're gonna be thrown into the fiery furnace if you don't bow. And they say, well, we're not going to bow. And they say, our God will protect us. But even if he doesn't, he's still God. And that is a part of this Bible lesson that I think needs to really be reinforced. Because there's times that people do die a martyr's death, and that too glorifies the Lord. It's not about the martyr, but it's about glorifying the Lord. And they end up in the fiery furnace, a furnace so hot that it even consumes the men that are opening the doors to put them into the fiery furnace. And yet, they walk around within it with the presence of the Lord. They come out not even singed, not even smelling of smoke, because the Lord protected them. But as I said, we need to remember that even if they had been consumed by the fire, God still would have been glorified. Glorified by their willingness to not compromise. And brothers and sisters, as I just have been sharing with a few church groups in Brazil, we are living in very dark days. We've seen a lot of dark things come up just recently with the Olympics that happened. And I try to keep these commentaries a little timeless, but if you're watching this another year, this was the 2024 Olympics, and there's been a number of blasphemous things happen during this time. And there are those who compromised and those who didn't compromise. And we need to make sure that we are standing firm on what we believe. And what do you believe? You need to make sure you're in God's Word so that you are standing firmly planted upon His Word. We don't need to compromise anymore. And for way too long, people in the church have said, well, I won't bow. I won't go prostrate before the statue, but I'll bow just a little bit, show a little respect to the statue. But it's time to stand up straight and say, I'm standing up straight for my Lord. Well, brothers and sisters, I hope your day's going well. Until tomorrow, God bless.